Attention in the terminal. Flight 264 with service to DC is now boarding Zone 3 at Gate B14. Again, that's Flight 264 with service to DC is now boarding Gate B14. Please have your boarding passes available. Final boarding call for Flight 264 with service to DC. Final boarding call for Flight 264 to DC at Gate B14.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard. Once you have located your
Nice pussy hat.
Thanks. I got my tickets as soon as I heard. I'm marching for climate change, for science and truth.
Whoa.
I'm marching for me, for my daughter, for my mother, and for every other woman in this country.
I'm marching because I think silence is not consent.
I'm marching because I think African American women and women of color aren't represented in this event.
Surrounded by support, I rise in the hopes that I will find my home in the depths of this endless vortex of voices, or will I lose myself searching for a sense of belonging? Questions that linger as I stand here imbued in uncertainty and anxiety. I cannot understand why I feel so unwelcome in a country that is supposed to be my home. With each new stamp on my passport, I find myself shackled, yearning for deliverance from a country warped by the insufferable weight of its oppressive past. It does not matter.
It does not matter.
This freedom has only ever existed as an unreachable white standard. This freedom was never meant for me, preached by a government that never wanted a part of me, and subsequently condemned all of me.
I'm coming from Oregon. How about you?
Originally, I'm from DC.
I'm coming from California. Anyone from there?
Me.
Utah, anyone?
Alabama over here.
Florida!
Welcome to the CBS News Decision Desk. As early indications suggest, this is going to be a tight race for president. We could be in for a long night.
The night of the election, I hosted a little thing at my place.
She was dressed in red, white, and blue. Yeah, we were ready.
I was so excited to finally be able to put the elections behind me. The campaigns were exhausting, and election night was going to bring some long-awaited relief.
The thing that really bothered me about this election season was that I had always believed that there were some unwritten rules about how political discourse was handled. You know, things politicians would and would not do, and all of that got thrown out the window.
Hey, guys! Hillary's winning in Florida.
Hillary is going to win. It's going to be fine.
As much as I was there to see Hillary Clinton win, I was there to see Donald Trump lose. But it didn't seem to be happening like I wanted it to. Trump wasn't winning, but he wasn't losing either.
There's no way in hell that a reality TV celebrity is going to be our president.
All the numbers aren't in yet, but right now she's kind of losing in Florida.
Seriously?
She's like losing.
I sat there until like 2 o'clock in the morning, hoping that this would be like sports and we'd have an overtime where Trump would ultimately get defeated.
It was not going the way we wanted it to, obviously.
Deeper concerns tonight as the world's shining light of democracy has gone dark.
On the drive home, my dad called to talk about the results. He wanted to talk about how the Dow future was down by some imaginary number of points. Market predictions weren't good. Money was on the line. I just wanted to get home to my boyfriend.
I was watching it with people who were quite conservative and couldn't understand why I was crying. One of my friends put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You'll be okay," as if he could understand the ramifications of what electing someone like Donald Trump could have on people who didn't fit the standard.
I'm going to bed.
Yeah, me too.
I went to bed too, but I just laid there staring at the ceiling. I couldn't fall asleep. I got up the next morning with not enough time to get to school, and I'm rushing around like, oh, I should check the results of the election. I took out my phone and, oh, shit.
Total shock.
Total disbelief.
Sad as fuck.
4 years?
I have never been so upset about an election. It didn't even feel like a real election. It was a travesty.
It was a white lash against a black president. And that's where the pain comes.
I remain defiantly optimistic and defiantly hopeful in changing times. Change is not a negative thing. Barack Obama was an advocate for change and indeed a change agent. And now we have a new administration with Donald Trump, and the future isn't spoken for. It's not set at all. All we have right now is right now.
Did your professor say anything in class?
I think my class is canceled, actually.
A lot of classes seem to be canceled.
I was taking a class on the election at the time. We arranged our seats in a circle and had an open discussion about what happened the night before. My professor handled it like a pro. She's a women's studies historian, having an open discussion the day after the biggest hit to women's equality in decades. And she was calm. If she could be composed, why couldn't I?
I had to go to all these classes where there were people celebrating, saying how happy they were that he was going to make America great again.
My professors wouldn't even bring it up. I just wanted to scream.
My professor passed around some considerations she'd gotten from a coffee shop that morning, and one of them had the typical cliche about how forgiveness is for myself, not those I forgive. I thought about how I could forgive the people who voted for Trump, and I didn't know if I could.
But one thing I've learned is to listen to others who feel different than me about it and why they feel like that way. If we could just put our guards down, we could build a bridge to one another. But there's a lot of personal agenda that takes place, so we end up being divided.
All I could think about was the progress that we lost as a nation, our history with the civil rights movement. I kept imagining MLK, all the social justice. We had a dream about having an America that's more inclusive and more diverse, and that dream just got trumped.
I'm sure when Obama was elected and re-elected, people thought, well, there goes the world. And I can empathize with that. It was the same way as soon as Trump got elected.
My prayer for this nation is that the unity that President Obama tried to get us to embrace will continue forth no matter who's the president.
Hillary Clinton was imperfect.
She definitely wasn't my ideal candidate. I mean, I changed my party affiliation from independent to Democrat just to vote for Bernie Sanders in the primaries.
Hell, she wasn't what I wanted in a Democrat at all. So didn't Republicans think the same thing? That Trump sucked, but he was a Republican, and a Republican is better than a Democrat? I thought when I watched Hillary's concession speech that morning that I would feel bad for her, but I think I just felt bad for myself. I kept thinking about how I could forgive the people who voted for Trump, but I needed to understand how they could vote for him despite his racist rhetoric and crude behavior. Were they scared for the last 8 years? Why were they scared? Economic anxiety? Did they vote out of spite? Out of racism? In this charged emotional state, I recognized that those people, Trump supporters, were largely just doing what they felt was best for their country. But their country definitely wasn't mine. I needed to learn about them. I was as ignorant of them as they were of me. But where do I even start?
The night Donald Trump got elected, I wept, I threw up, I was devastated. I felt like if there was anything I could do, I had to do it. And going to the march felt like a good way to get my ass out of my chair and go do something about it.
I used to protest in the 60s and 70s, and back then we were really active politically against the Vietnam War. Well, it felt like our voices were being heard. As we grew older, we grew quieter, but now that Trump's been elected, I think it's time that we speak up again.
In the past year, I lost my marriage, I lost my parents, I lost my home, I lost my job, and at the age of 66, I'm starting over. But I'll be damned if I'm going to be pushed aside because I'm not living up to what the illusion of the American dream is. So I've decided that it's time for me to speak.
It was after the election that I first began to hear of a protest march that was supposed to take place after the inauguration. Dr. Ortiz forwarded us an email from Dr. Marati about a potential collaboration between the Women's Studies Department and the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and I jumped on it.
Holland caught me in the office, told me about some women's march that was happening in D.C. She was planning to take a team of 20 students up there to do interviews with the marchers. I didn't know very much about the march, but I volunteered to be on that team before she had time to offer me a spot. It was only later that I learned that the march was happening the day after the inauguration, and that we were going there too.
I didn't know anything about the trip or SPOP until I literally just got a text from my friend Tico that was like, "Bitch, we're going to the Women's March to do oral history." And I was like, yes we are. That's all I needed.
I needed to do something. It didn't matter what it was, just something, so that I wouldn't continue feeling so defeated. I wanted to send a message to Trump.
I wasn't going to march. Yeah, I was pissed off, but I wanted to go as an unbiased observer, as an oral historian, to connect with people. Up until this last election, I thought I knew what my country was, and now I guess I just felt like I really needed to reacquaint myself with it. And though I was afraid, DC just seemed like the best place to start.
In preparation, I made 10 different signs with social messages ranging from
Tears of the patriarchy.
We are all immigrants.
Unlearn sexism and rape culture.
Slay the patriarchy.
Respect existence or expect resistance.
Viva la vulva!
Oh my God, how long have you been up making these? They look good. What are they for?
I'm going to Washington.
Oh, awesome. Me too. I'm leaving Thursday.
That's a little early.
Your posters have so much glitter.
You know, I'm leaving on Saturday. I'm super excited to march. I've been waiting to do this forever.
Oh, I'm not going to the march. I'm going to the inauguration. I'm really excited to see President Donald Trump. It's been a long time coming.
Oh.
I don't get these posters. Why do you have to be so political?
One of the people who came on the trip with us was an older woman, a non-traditional undergraduate student named Brenda. Now, Brenda's really awesome, always pushing us to look at both sides of issues and to take off our rose-colored glasses.
I was driving, and I felt awkward as an older woman and a group of college kids. I hope there's not a bomb. But really, that's what I was thinking.
I'm not throwing away my shot.
For me, this is a chance to reach out to the Trump supporters and to create dialogue from one side of the divide to the other.
Because I'm just like my country, I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I am not throwing away my shot.
See, I've got a past that connects me with them. I am a mother from Southern Ruralite Baptist America. I was a small business owner for 15 years, a Republican for 45.
I'm a shining piece of coal trying to reach my goal.
They don't surprise me in what they're doing because I can connect with them. I'm not surprised that they don't understand that the hurt of what they stand for.
I gotta holler just to be heard with every word. I drop knowledge.
But I wonder, can I still connect with them? You know, since my mind and my ideas have changed, maybe there is some sort of a mediator type of thing that can happen between me and them.
I got a scholarship to King's College.
I think everyone matters, you know. It doesn't matter if you understand or agree with their feelings or their stance. Everyone matters.
I got a lot of brains, but no polish.
Maybe I should tap into that. Maybe this is my shot.
Rise up, it's time to take a shot. I've been up since 3 a.m., and I'm crammed in a car full of people who don't know each other, and all I want is somewhere to rest my head, but there is nowhere to rest my head. So all I can do is stay up and obsess over what we're going to find and what's going to happen in D.C. Is no one else worried about the inauguration? Because besides Brenda, we're all either queer, people of color, or both. And we're about to walk into what could be the biggest Trump rally ever. Can we talk about that?
I feel like I'm gonna die. I don't know if I got myself sick from stressing out about leading this trip, or if my date the other night gave me her cold, but I feel awful. Also, why do we have to listen to 2 hours of Hamilton? I mean, I was into it at first, but this shit is just dragging.
I hope that when I talk to people about this project, I'm articulate.
I just hope we can check into our hotel rooms after driving 12 and a half hours.
And the march, I just hope that it goes beyond surface level understandings of what feminism is and what social movements like this even mean.
I hope there's not a bomb.
The atmosphere here is insane. It's crazy versus crazy. I'm against abortion. I think it's murder. And feminism is gone too far. They just want more rights than men.
I think this election was a push from Hillary and a pull to Trump.
In this inauguration, the peaceful transition of power means we may have different perspectives or different views or even different processes for the way we think this country should proceed. We elect individuals to lead us and to represent us, and once that is done, it's done. And then we come in and we have to try our best to do our part to support the growth of Americans and the growth of other individuals in this country.
I wouldn't consider myself a Trump supporter, but regardless, he's our president and we've got to stand by him.
The morning of the inauguration, it was dark and cold and drizzly. I'd never been to an inauguration before. I was excited to do interviews and just feeling the general energy of D.C.
By the time we got off the metro, the crowds were crazy, and all the lines to get into the inauguration were incredibly long.
We were in a sea of red hats with their hard bills pointing toward an imaginary future where America could be made great again. 3 women rode by on bicycles wearing warm, soft pink hats on their heads. And how subversive, I thought. Those pussy hats were sincerely the first glimmer of hope that day.
We started by interviewing people in line, and then, in a major breach of journalistic integrity, we butted our way into the front of the line and made it into the National Mall. Inside the mall, there was room to breathe and do interviews. And there was a small protest, and later that day, I learned there was a more violent protest just outside.
Brenda and Zach were off on their own doing video interviews. They hit me up to join them at the inauguration because one of our colleagues from Iowa had given us her tickets. As we made our way into the fenced-off zones in front of the Capitol building, Brenda filled me in on a wild interview she just done with a Bible-thumping Trump supporter.
These guys want to be heard. I've just got to get past this brigade of army guards. I'm just going to listen for what they're trying to communicate. Sir, hi, can you tell me who I'm here with today?
This is Rubin, Isreal, Los Angeles.
Great. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself and what you're doing here?
Well, first of all, because I'm an American. Number 2, because I'm a Christian. And number 3, because this is a big event for America. You don't need to know who I am. I mean, what's next? My shoe size? No. You ask me a question, I simply give you an answer.
Well, shit, this is going to be hard. He's got some walls up. Did you vote for Trump?
Absolutely. What? You think I'd want a woman in that White House? Are you kidding me? After having a Muslim? A woman is not fit for that job. We here represent our president, and we're glad to have him. And we're glad that Clinton has been aborted out of that presidency.
Oh, he's saying this to me?
This president wants to deport Muslims. I'm in favor of that. That's great. Don't you think that's good?
No, I'm not here to voice my opinion, sir. I'm here to listen to yours.
Don't you care about women? Women in Saudi Arabia, like yourself, can't even drive a car because of their religion. You'd need a chaperone. Well, they'd behead you because of your education. And you don't want to say anything?
Oh, he's attacking me personally, on purpose. Okay, Brenda, you've really got to keep yourself under control. How do you feel about the protesters that are going to be here this weekend?
You mean the people that break things, burn things, vandalize? Why don't you go talk to them? That speaks volumes of these people. Liberals, who actually blanket themselves with the term tolerant. They're not very tolerant.
What am I going to ask this crazy guy? I don't even know what I should ask him. I can't even think.
We here represent our president, right? Now you got blacks saying that he's racist. How hypocritical is that? It's about as phony as it gets.
How am I going to ask him a question that sounds serious without him thinking I am trying to attack him? Do you have family in LA?
Yeah, of course I do. I was born and raised there.
And they support you in what you're doing here?
Of course they do. It's family. I don't know, maybe you were born from a trailer park, but I actually grew up with a family that supports what it is we do.
I can't attack him. I have to make some sort of a connection here.
We here live in America. This nation was founded by God. You said you're involved with history. Be a historian. Look at all the landmarks. They have Bible verses. This is a country that had faith in God. And when you have a person like Hillary or Obama, they remove that faith. That's what angers these people here.
I can't even listen to this guy. I am so disgusted.
So we're reminding them of our heritage, of our history, and that is that men are used by God, not women. It's pretty simple. Women should not be involved in politics. As a matter of fact, when women do become involved in politics, gay marriage becomes legalized, abortion becomes legalized, the whole political structure is thrown out of whack. You might call me a sexist, it is what it is. A woman should have her place, and that's being a good mother, raising kids at home. A woman is not fit to be in office.
Oh my God. Do you not think that people are getting maybe a little sense of hatred from your protest here?
Hatred? Let me explain the stupidity of your word. Muslims are the problem. Islam is the problem. If you think a sign is hatred, you're beyond foolish.
I'm failing. I am failing this interview. I'm failing to make some sort of a connection.
As a matter of fact, why doesn't your university send you to Saudi Arabia? And let's see what that religion does to you. You'll come back to this planet, you'll come back to Earth, to the U.S., and kiss the soil.
I felt broken. Broken like a wild horse. I had failed to connect. I had failed to find the key to being a mediator for America. I thought that this whole Trump phenomenon was just a gross negligence to communicate on the part of liberal America. I thought that Inauguration Day could be my chance to help fix America. I thought I could literally connect with these people because I used to be one. I thought I could stand in the gulf that divided America and bring them together. But now, God, more than ever, I realize we've got a long road to hoe, you know? We got a long road to hoe.
I think what was so amazing about Brenda that day is that everything she was scared of, she just went and did it. And then she came out on the other side like, yeah, I was scared. And then I did it.
Brenda somehow still had a lot of energy and motivation after her interview with the street preacher. I, of course, had no clue what sort of emotional beating she had just been subjected to. But regardless, she plowed her way through the inauguration crowd, carving out a space for herself, Zach, and I. Press! Press! She kept yelling as we made our way through the crowd. I was kind of embarrassed, and there was some definite attention being drawn to us. I didn't necessarily want any extra attention in that environment. I mean, I kind of looked like a dyke. But finally, we got situated and watched the inaugural procession. Senator Schumer began to speak.
We Americans have always been a forward-thinking, problem-solving, optimistic, patriotic, and decent people. Whatever our race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity.
I met my girlfriend at Gainesville's University Club a week before the inauguration. It was Friday the 13th, and I wasn't even planning on going out that night. In fact, I wore my Bernie Sanders campaign tee sort of jokingly that night, partly because I was feeling a really casual vibe, but with the inauguration a week away, that shirt represented a somewhat sarcastic ode to that era of idealism in my life. My girlfriend would later tell me the shirt caught her eye from the upstairs balcony of the club. It wasn't long before I caught her goofily smiling at me and the adorable gap between her two front teeth drawing me closer until finally, would you like to dance? I made sure to ask her on a date before we left for D.C., and she made sure to invite me to a Meet the Family dinner not long after that.
Let's pray, shall we? Dear Lord, we gather here before you to share in this meal that has been prepared, and we are grateful for all that you provide for us. Thank you for the time we are able to share together as a family, and thank you for the company of Rebekah's new friend, Holland. Amen.
Amen.
So, Holland, you're living in Gainesville? What are you doing up there?
Yeah, so I work a couple of jobs at UF. In one of them, I lead an informal English class for international students, and the other's at the oral history program. There I kind of do like a myriad of things. I don't even know how to go about describing it without getting too in-depth.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty fun and exciting stuff.
And Holland went to the inauguration. She led a research trip for UF to DC.
Wow.
Well, actually, we went primarily to document the Women's March on Washington, but yes, we did interviews at the inauguration as well.
Oh, okay.
Well, I imagine that must have been some sort of an experience. It was hard for us to cast our vote, but I just couldn't trust Hillary with the whole email thing.
Trump clearly wasn't the ideal candidate, but you can always trust the Republicans to uphold the Christian values. And I think Pence has more of a level head. He's the one running the show anyway.
Well, like I said, we conducted research at both events. The inauguration was...
Holland.
I wanted to be able to tell my girlfriend's family about the stark contrast between Inauguration Day and the Women's March. I wanted to tell them how wonderful it was to feel so much support and compassion radiating from the crowds we encountered that Saturday. However, much like I stood there expressionless during Senator Schumer's speech, I sat objectively at the dinner table with my girlfriend's family as the friend.
By the way, Holland and I are dating.
The closer it got to inauguration, the more in denial I became. It felt so surreal that something that The Simpsons made a joke of in an episode 17 years ago was about to become my reality. I mean, it was 2017. I firmly believed that people were more informed and more accepting. I felt so frustrated at the people who voted for Trump because I felt like they were too blissfully ignorant to understand the severity of their actions. So I completely shut myself off from anyone who did in fact vote for him. It led me to have a huge echo chamber for myself, only surrounding myself with people that thought and felt the same way as I did. And for a while, I didn't think that was much of a problem. I mean, I was right and they were wrong, right? But it wasn't until later that I realized it's a lot more nuanced than that. I became so intense and started to resent people that even had the slightest inclination towards Trump. I became unwilling to talk to, let alone befriend, anyone that was remotely conservative. For a while, I just didn't know what to do. You're your own greatest deceiver. And I was my own greatest deceiver, because you're capable of justifying any of your actions to the point where you think that you're the good guy in your story. But it's not always as black and white as that. And that's what led me to take a step back, create some space, and I was able to put myself in their shoes. And it shifted my perspective, and thus changed the world around me.
I couldn't shake the weight of the day back at the hotel room that night. The America that my family had tried to keep at an arm's distance had just elected a racist, misogynist, fear-mongering, tax-evading, sexual predator president. And I just watched him get sworn in. Signs and buttons held by protesters all on the way back to the hotel read, not my president. But he is our president. He's my president. To claim the contrary is to rescind all responsibility for the corrupt ideas, the oversight, the indifference that got him where he is. We didn't do enough. I know I didn't. And now, a lot of people are going to pay for it. To claim the contrary is to turn our backs on all the people who gave him the job. And let's be honest, it's not just our neighbors and our classmates. They're our friends and our family members. So what was tomorrow going to do? Why march? What's the point? At 9 p.m., I get a text from Holland to see if I want to do an interview. It's with a family that came to DC to also be a part of the Women's March. And I wanted to say no. I was tired, and I couldn't imagine this family having anything to say that were ideas that I didn't hold for myself or that I hadn't already read somewhere else. But it was what I was here to do. So after a brief introduction, we dove right in.
My daughter and I were watching the election results, and I told her a story from my childhood. My grandparents lived in Connecticut, and there was a KKK rally in town. My grandfather was looking out the window at the rally.
You know what? It's always better to see things than to be afraid of them.
So we went down to the rally, and we sat on a stone wall nearby. I was sitting next to a reporter, and we started talking.
You know, I feel afraid sitting here.
Would you mind explaining to my granddaughter why you feel that way?
I'm not white, and those people down there don't like anyone who isn't white.
Can't you call the police? Can't you get someone to stop this?
Alison, you can't just tell people what they can and can't say in this country.
Then what do you do?
You have to remember that you have the same right. And if it ever feels like anyone's trying to take that away from you, that's a direct threat to you and to our country.
So in my interview with Alison Auden, she shared, the Audens held a lot of the ideas that I expected, but they'd already learned so much from the planning of the march, things that I would only learn for myself the next day. What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, I think when people come together, it energizes a movement in a way you can't do otherwise. I didn't take my daughter into the city because I wasn't sure how safe it would be to bring a kid in. We went to a museum in Baltimore, and it was filled with people that were there for the march. They had on pins, they had on hats, and so you could talk to people you didn't know. You could reach out, talk, and have a conversation. And that's how movement is built. And I think it's really important to be a part of that. I've thought more about women's issues recently than I've thought about them in a long time.
What do you mean?
Well, sure, I've experienced sexism and sexual harassment in the workplace, and I've worked through that. But I'm starting to realize that it was probably easier for me to work through those things as a white woman than it could be or has been for other women. When you have a grassroots movement like this, you learn from each other, and that makes a movement so much stronger.
I guess that's when it hit me. I was beginning to realize that something big was on the horizon, and while I was still unsure of how effective that something would be and what tangible change it could bring about, listening to the Alamans and Audens talk about how this march had already forced them to think beyond their own lived experience and privilege as a white middle-class family, it filled me with an anticipation that wasn't there before.
I'm marching because I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and I am very opposed to what this president stands for. He has no Christian values, and if we don't make our voices known against somebody who is blatantly disregarding the sick, disregarding the poor, disregarding the sojourner, that is what Christ is all about. And this man is none of that.
I'm here to show the world that around the U.S., the women and the minorities and the people who live a different lifestyle are represented, and we are coming together.
The morning of the Women's March, we started by going to a breakfast for Florida women, hosted by, among others, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who I do not support, but it was in the spirit of like Floridian solidarity or something. There was a line out the door and down the block to get into a reception and coffee and bagels and a talk with Debbie Wasserman Schultz. The first interview I did that day, and the first time I cried that day, was with an incredible woman who was just covered in pins with the names of all her friends from Florida who couldn't make it to the march. It was an incredible gesture. By the time we got into the breakfast, there weren't any more coffee or bagels, which is sad for me because my body metabolizes food into energy.
As soon as I got to the metro stop, it was just this flood of pink. It was beautiful.
I would never be caught wearing a pussy hat. I mean, I don't necessarily enjoy wearing that pink flesh between my legs, so why the fuck would I want to wear it on my head?
Pussy hats were everywhere. All around us were cisgendered women who were holding signs about reproductive rights and urging the president to keep his tiny hands to himself.
Even though those messages apply to my biological body, my gender identity and sexuality make those issues feel almost irrelevant to me. I felt solidarity at the march in the sense that it stood to oppose everything the Trump agenda represented, but I still felt that I couldn't connect with pussy hats or the endless imagery of vulvas and ovaries. To me, those messages belong strictly to cis women, and as someone who's non-binary, I felt more like an ally to the women who wore their pussy hats loud and proud.
I thought Trump's pussy-grabbing comments to Billy Bush would cost him the election. I admired how clever the pussy hats were, a seemingly infinite sea of women mocking Trump. Women have every right to assert that their bodies belong to them and are not up for non-consensual grabs.
Despite my own dissociation with all the references to female genitalia at the march, I failed to recognize how exclusionary those images are to trans women. Being non-binary has included a fair share of anxiety regarding my biological sex, yet I feel that my gender identity ultimately liberates me from needing to connect to any specific sex or gender. I'm not a man or a woman, I'm Holland. Yeah. So as you can see, these are a couple of non-binary interviewees that I came across in front of the Capitol building. And I asked them if anyone had approached them to talk to them about their sign, and they said they mostly received laughs and people getting the P reference. But when I asked them if anyone had approached them regarding the deeper issue of gender in America, they said that no one really addressed that with them. And so, to me, I thought that really spoke to the pussy hats. I thought they were funny. A lot of people thought they were funny. But did we really get to the deeper issue of gender in America with this march?
I've been to a number of these marches, and there's always this overwhelming sense of solidarity and comfort. But never have I ever felt such love and support in one of these spaces.
I wish everyone could see and feel what I did on that day. There were multiple points throughout the day where we couldn't raise our arms away from our bodies. We were so packed together. And at the same time, I've never felt so safe surrounded by complete strangers. It was like there was this mutual understanding between everyone there that we all belonged in this space.
Eventually, we wiggled our way onto the National Mall where there was room to breathe and do interviews. The march wasn't supposed to be on the mall, but there were just too many people.
I didn't come to D.C. to march. It's not that I didn't agree with the marchers or I wasn't outraged by the election results. It's just that I didn't understand or think that there was anything a march could do, you know? And it wasn't until I was standing here surrounded by a sea of marchers that I realized this is bigger than me.
I'm here with my friend Marcia. We met a few months ago at an all-American event. We were in the State Fair pie baking contest, and we became friends. This is our second time spending time together, and it's at an all-American protest, because that's what women do. Bake pies and protest. It's America today.
The reclaiming of our space and the reclaiming of our narrative is a recurring theme in trans organizing. We need to show up and assert that we need to be here and be included.
As a Latina, I think it's important that I not stand on the sidelines, that I show up and show that our community has strong family values.
I hope we can all be equal. It's such a divided world we live in. It's not healthy for anyone. We need to come together.
After a few hours, we took a break, hid our press badges, and joined the march proper. We climbed a freestanding scaffolding and had an incredible view of the hundreds of thousands of people who came to march. After a few hours, the crowd slowly started to move. We shuffled along until we reached the White House, and then we just continued into downtown D.C. At some point, we ended up in the front of the march, blocking intersections, getting honked at by cars, and shouting call and response protests.
People were laughing, cheering, crying, and walking in every direction. I encountered a Brazilian whistle and drum group. I started dancing, but not just dancing. I was dancing my heart out. I was surrounded with strange people that didn't feel very strange. A lady placed a heart-shaped sticker on my cheek, a moment of mutual understanding without speaking. I kept dancing. I started crying. No one told me it would be like this, that in my search for home, I would discover bliss. I can taste the red blood of sacrifice, surrounded by those who are also willing to fight for inclusion against a white, bleached privilege. My identity is made up of a kaleidoscope of colors that are not limited to red, white, and blue. No one told me that in my search for home, I would discover the unremitting flame of resistance, whose vehement inferno ignites in me a newfound militancy and fuses the divisions engendered by bigoted institutions, those which aim to whitewash the egregious reality of our nation. And even now, in the face of tyranny, I'm not alone. I remember feeling exhausted, but I kept going. I was surrounded by strangers and family all at once. It was an intense high. I could feel tears rolling down my cheeks, but I didn't feel like I was crying. I didn't feel any pain. I felt like we were going to be okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now go live to the Democracy Now! Live broadcast of the unconquerable Dr. Angela Davis.
Woo! Let us remind ourselves that we, the hundreds of thousands, the millions of women, trans people, men, and youth here at the Women's March represents the powerful forces of change determined to prevent the dying cultures of racism, heteropatriarchy from rising again.
I didn't go to the march. I didn't have the experiences that they had when going there. So I want to use my voice as someone from the outside looking in. I want to highlight the intersectionality of the march.
Without intersectionality, there's no way to talk about the experiences of people who belong to more than one oppressed group.
It's the point where being a woman meets being a person who is queer, a person of color, a person who is disabled. It means fighting multiple systems of oppression at once.
It means recognizing that the women's movement is more than just the movement for white women's rights.
We are collective agents of history, and that history cannot be deleted like web pages. The freedom struggles of Black people have shaped the very nature of this country's history, and that history cannot be deleted with the sweep of a hand.
Pretty much everything that Angela Davis' speech says encompasses anything and everything that needs to be known about intersectionality, not only in the march, but around the world.
Of course, the march was eventually intentional in being inclusive and intersectional, but it was amazing to me to see how some of the white women actually marching failed to recognize other systemic forms of oppression, just because those issues don't speak to what's been at the center of the white feminist movement. The prime example I saw of this was a white woman wearing an outfit made entirely of bras, with messages from friends who couldn't be at the march.
I felt the best way that I could represent my friends would be with their undergarments. So I have their bras with me, and on them they wrote their names and causes they feel very vigilant about. I have about 20 of them on my person, and I feel them here with me today.
One of the cups had All Lives Matter written on it, and that baffles me because it's like your friend came to Washington, D.C. to participate in the largest protest of a presidency in American history, and that's the one message you want to send? You want to assert colorblindness and that all lives matter, even though that statement blatantly ignores the issues that the Black Lives Matter movement seeks to address?
We cannot be made to forget that Black lives do matter. This country's history is anchored in slavery and colonialism, which means, for better or for worse, the very history of the United States is a history of immigration and enslavement. Spreading xenophobia, hurling accusations of murder and rape, and building walls will not erase that history. No human being is illegal.
Woo. Yes.
I literally come from a family of immigrants. My parents, my aunts, my uncles, even my cousins. To me, the anti-immigrant rhetoric was an attack on my family and my culture, even though I was born here. But my parents felt differently about the situation. They agreed with Trump, saying that it's the illegal immigrants that are the problem, and not them because they came into the country legally. But why should our privilege make us any different from them when we essentially had the same drive to be here in the first place, wanting to provide better opportunities for our families that the countries that we left could not provide? Isn't it our moral duty to keep families together and encourage aspiring Americans to fully participate in our economy and society? The call to love thy neighbor is not limited to our imperialistic man-made borders. Migration is a human right.
We dedicate ourselves to collective resistance. Resistance to attacks on Muslims and immigrants. Resistance to attacks on disabled people. Resistance perpetrated by the state through the police and the prison industrial complex. Resistance to institutional gender violence, especially against trans women of color.
Yes.
Over the next months and years, we will be called upon to intensify our demands for social justice, to become more militant in our defense of vulnerable populations. Those who still defend the supremacy of the white male heteropatriarchy had better watch out.
I was blown away by the horde of issues represented in the signs of this march. Everything from protesting police brutality, to the defunding of Planned Parenthood, to violence against the trans community, to immigrant, refugee, and ability discrimination, to taxes on tampons and birth control, to the Flint water crisis. Even the Virgin Islands, whose residents did not have a vote in the presidential election, were there to represent themselves with their own signs.
Show me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
After a while, I could not help myself. I started chanting along with them.
No Trump.
No KKK, no fascist USA.
After a year of watching my country play into the hands of fear-mongering, misogynistic rhetoric that made me feel unsafe to visit the Capitol as a woman of color, this march, it was something I had no idea I needed.
No hate, no fear. Immigrants are welcome here.
The America that I loved, that I believed in, that I thought I'd lost, it was all around me that day. It was not going anywhere, not as long as there were still people willing to resist. And just like that, I was marching in the largest single-day demonstration in American history. When human rights are under attack, what do?
Stand up, fight back.
The next 1,459 days of the Trump administration will be 1,459 days of resistance. Resistance on the ground.
Woo!
Resistance on the job.
Yes!
Resistance in our classrooms.
Woo!
Resistance in our music and in our art.
Yes!
This is just the beginning.
Woo!
4 years of activism. That scares me. I'm passionate about the cause, but I'm barely staying afloat in my daily life. I already feel like my anxiety and depression are getting the best of me, like I don't know how I'll make it through the next day. What if I can't find the strength to fight?
The strength is in numbers. Having each other's back when one needs it the most is the only way that we can unite in solidarity. The march ignited the spark in the thousands of people that attended, and it showed them if they felt like they needed to change something that was an injustice, they needed to get up off their ass and do something about it.
There was this really great sign that I think we need to hold on to that says something like, if we don't go home and do something, then it was just a parade. And that's what we need to do. We need to go home. We need to gather, and we need to speak out against the administration.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. I tell our women all the time the important thing about this march is to keep the momentum. We have to stay pissed off. It was exciting and invigorating to be there, but if we're not pissed off, we're not going to get anything done.
We're here to protest the idea that we hate. We don't hate. We love, and we grow stronger in love because we are here to protest together.
When I went to the Women's March, I was reaching a threshold in my life. I had to decide how I was going to spend the next 4 years. And I did not want to spend it sitting at home while racists were empowering and emboldening themselves on my campus. I didn't want to spend it while marginalized groups were being silenced and while their protests were being misrepresented. And that's why we're here today, to tell our story of how we connected with America and with ourselves in a new way.
In planning this trip, I wondered how our fieldwork could inspire and encourage empathy, specifically for marginalized groups. You can't be an effective ally without sincerely putting yourself in someone else's shoes, listening to the people who make up these groups, and hearing their concerns.
I think that a lot of personal growth comes from being in challenging spaces. And I'm not just talking about the inauguration. It was only through talking to other people that I got a really good sense of where we were and where we are. It might be really, really ugly, but it wakes you the fuck up.
I'm Aliya. I'm the daughter of veterans, the daughter and granddaughter of immigrants. I'm an American. I benefit from the privilege of my birthplace, my light skin color, my economic status, and my ability. I am an intersectional feminist, and I'm doing the best that I can.
My name is Holland. I'm an atheist and a Leo, and I'm studying to be a mental health counselor.
My name's Xander. I'm white as fuck, Latino of Venezuelan descent from the 305.
My name is Zach. I'm a gay man, and I'm the son of an incredible woman.
I'm Elisabeth, a strong and passionate Boricua, queer mujercita with no shame. And I am not alone. I am here to tell you that I am worth something.
That my ethnicity has nothing to do with my brain.
That my gender will not be defined by your social constraints.
That my loved ones will not be taken away from me.
That my home is not where, but rather with whom.
We have fought too long and too hard to give up.
It is now, my brothers and sisters, we must speak out.
It is now we must come together and fight for our rights.
We must actively seek to challenge one another.
To join forces and arm ourselves with knowledge. We must become their governors, their senators, their presidents.
Yeah.